Hi, hold on a second. I gotta get my dog situated. There we go. All right. Hi, welcome back to Storytime with Dad Booker. Appreciate you coming back. This is Maddie, one of my two dogs. She decided she wanted to be in on the reading. Now, we read chapter 2 last time, and chapter 3 is A Legend is Born. Now, I've already read that one, and it is on here on the on my YouTube site. So I tell you what, I'll put a link up to that when I put up the verbiage, and we're going to skip over A Legend is Born and go right to the Torches Past. Torches Past is where the original team passes the torch to Donald and all the younger generation. So you going to listen to this? Okay. Okay. The quote is from Randy Savage. I used to hate the old-timers who didn't praise the younger wrestlers, but you got to pass the torch sometime. If you're old, that torch gets too heavy for you and you can't carry it, so it won't do you any good. That's from Randy Savage. Don and Honey were seated comfortably in the dining room talking over a cup of tea when Donald walked in. He had recently graduated from college and was now home working out his future plans. He had majored in history and languages. On his off time, he had visited and helped out at the village on the edge of the property. Today, his future was to be decided. He and a few others would become full members of the Guild of Travelers. Don appraised his son warmly. Don had gotten his looks from himself, and it amused him to see this younger version wandering around. From Honey, he had gotten inquisitiveness and enthusiasm. From both, he had gained his intelligence and love of history. His questing, restless mind was always looking ahead to the next challenge or adventure. Since graduating, he had spent more and more time in the village. Wolf and Francis's daughter, Zeke, and he were constant companions there. They had known each other ever since they were children and had become very close over the years. As they had grown closer, Don and Honey had looked on with pleasure as characteristics of both parents. One of the most marked was that they sang and bumped hips in rhythm as they worked on the village farm together, just as Wolf and Francis always did. It was to be a full day with many familiar faces in attendance. Linus was coming from ancient Rome to perform the ceremony. Frank and Sandy's twins, Lon and Lorna, would be showing up from Rome as well. Lon and Lorna had spent almost as much time in the present as they had in the year 110 AD. They could transition in seconds and treated Don and Honey's place as a second home. Linus knocked on the door, waited a few seconds, and let himself in. Dragging his feet, he walked unsteadily to the table and sat down heavily. He helped himself to a steaming cup of tea and a blueberry muffin. Leaning back in the chair, he stretched, yawning prodigiously. He had been working long hours taking care of the taverna Scott and Livia had opened long ago. It had been a labor of love for them. Now, ever since Scott and Livia had passed 10 years ago, he worked it with a series of transient assistants. Still, it was hard work since he had also taken over Scott's portion of the winery behind the home he had shared with his parents for so long. And that also took up a great deal of his time. Donald sat fidgeting at the end of the table drinking a soda. Then he recognized the symptoms of someone who's waiting on an expected lover and smiled inwardly. Donald's constant glances towards the door and the clock betrayed his outward attempt at nonchalance. When there finally came a knock at the door, he bolted from his chair and sped to answer it. Many moments later, he walked in with his arm around Zeke. She was a dark-haired beauty with freckles, a warm smile, and an elegant but sturdily built physique. She looked up at Donald and they kissed again. How much they were in love was evident whenever they were together. Honey smiled at Zeke. How's your mom? Is she looking forward to her birthday party? Zeke giggled. She's doing all right for someone who's 232 years old, and yes, she can't wait for the party. Thank you for arranging it for her. Honey grinned. Not a problem. We have all our friends from the neighboring farms coming, so it should be quite the shindig. Mac is doing the catering with his son Wensleydale. Don slyly glanced up from his tea. Too bad we won't have Frank here. Then we could have Frank's mac and cheese. Honey threw the last of her muffin at Don, telling him to behave. Don picked the projectile off the floor and popped it in his mouth. Ah, added flavor, he said with a wide grin. Honey went around the table and hugged him. She wondered if she would ever get used to her lunatic of a husband. Honey jumped when the grandfather clock loudly proclaimed the time of 1800. She grabbed the tray of muffins, with Don grabbing the tea urn and cups. Everyone went into the lab, laid out the refreshments, and then sat back once more to wait for the rest of the party. Fred, or to state it more formally, the temporal correlation vector transport device, glowed bright blue, announcing Lon and Lorna were arriving. They showed up in togas, excused themselves, and then went to their lockers to change. They returned in sweats and t-shirts, grabbing a few muffins and tea, chatting pleasantly as they waited for the ceremony to begin. Don and Honey were seated at the end of the table, holding hands. For all of them, tonight was to be an emotional one. Linus gathered his wits and stood. Being Scott's adopted son, he had been delegated to perform the transition ceremony. Let me see. Maybe we can do it. At the last moment, Wilf and Francis showed up and sat next to Honey and Don. Lon and Lorna explained that Frank and Sandy were unable to make it due to guests in their hotel. Linus acknowledged the new arrivals and cleared his throat. For many years, we have been using Fred to travel through history, examining, annotating, and writing papers to correct particulars of the past. Those of us who have traveled are now turning over the cause to you. We have started. He opened a leather pouch and pulled out a wood torch with brass embellishments. He placed it in the center of the table. This is the torch from the first Olympic Games. It was passed from hand to hand as we pass on the Guild of Travelers to you. This is voluntary, and no one will think anything of it against you if you do not wish to be part of this. However, if you are willing to join us in this endeavor, place your hand on the torch. Donald, Zeke, Lon, and Lorna all unhesitatingly reached out and touched the torch. Don muttered under his breath, "We never got the Olympic torch." Honey squeezed his hand. Linus looked up to see Wilf, Francis, Don, and Honey all in tears. Linus raised the torch and placed it in a stand at the center of the table. The torch has been passed, and a new generation has been inducted into the Guild of Travelers. Before we go further, you will need to vote on who will be your leader. This person will be responsible for the safety of the team and will be responsible for Fred. All fingers immediately pointed at Donald, who accepted reluctantly. We will now add all of your pictures on the wall. Each inductee had their pictures taken, printed out, framed, and hung on the wall. At the top and center was Scott's picture. Under were the pictures of the original members, Don, Honey, Frank, Sandy, Wilf, and Francis, and of course Linus. Everyone shook hands and the original team went out. Linus handed a gilded missive written on goatskin parchment to Donald as he passed. Please excuse me while I take a look at the letter Linus presented to me. When he finished reading, he looked at the assembled group with a furrowed brow. I had in my hand coordinates to be fed into Fred, and then we are to go through and meet someone. It doesn't say who. Does everyone have their returns? Everyone pulled one out, each one having a unique style to it, and put them on. Please press the top two buttons for a systems check. Everyone complied, and Donald went to the primary control board. Well, everything shows ready. He loaded in the coordinates and held his hand over the activation pad. "Let's go see who wants to talk to us," he said, his voice shaking between nervousness and excitement. Now, the next chapter, is also short. And I think what we'll do is we'll read that one too, because you'll see who they meet. And that will be it for this book. That was, that's 4 chapters. We're actually doing 5, but we already did 1. So let's do Time to Meet the Maker. I guess that's just the life of an inventor. What people do with your idea takes you totally by surprise. That quote was from Stephanie Kwolek, inventor of Kevlar. Donald pressed the activation panel and the portal opened onto what looked to be a living room. A familiar-looking old man was sitting in a comfortable chair at the back. They walked through, stepping onto thick carpet. The man waved them to sit in the chairs before him. When they were seated, he looked them over. He was a very, very old man who was resting his chin on gnarled hands over the handle of a walking cane. He was dressed in a toga with an incongruous... I don't know why I put these words in here when I can't say them. Incongruous bow tied around his throat and wool socks over skinny legs and his sandals. Oh, she's sleepy. I'll talk quieter. "Hi, kids," he smiled warmly at them. "I'm Scott. You may have heard of me." They all acknowledged that they had indeed heard of him. They waited for him to tell them why they were there. "Congratulations on being the next generation of the Guild of Travelers. We've traveled through history and have set the record straight on many aspects that historians have really screwed up on. Not their fault, though. Interpretation of data sometimes can lead to erroneous conclusions, unless you have our advantage. Now you are in control, Fred, and I wanted to have a word with you before you embark on your travels." He leaned back and placed his cane on his lap. "The best thing about time travel is that I can set things up to meet you. However, this may be our only meeting, though. I created Fred with the help of Don many years ago. Together and separately, we went on a lot of adventures. As the guild grew and more joined, we were able to cover more history and discover erroneous facts placed in our history books. Through publications of our own, we have attempted to set the record straight. The Fred wasn't built just for correcting the history books. We have also used the machine for our own amusements, seeing Shakespeare plays, Mozart operas, hearing Greek poets, reading their own poems, and eating at some of the earliest and best restaurants. Plus visiting entertainments now long gone. We are a guild of discovery. The primary rule is that we do our utmost to not create any changes. The rest is up to you. Use it for edification as well as enjoyment with my blessings. Now, any questions?" Zeke raised her hand. "No need to raise your hands, dear. What would you like to know?" "We have been told that we can't change things. Why not make things better?" Scott blew out his cheeks and rubbed his temples. The forever question. If you check the laws, you can read about the times we tried. Don and I both tried to prevent something from happening. He to assist one side of the Civil War, and myself to prevent Lincoln's assassination. Both tries failed. Don's with almost disastrous results, and mine were almost as bad. Zeke, your mother set us straight when she asked a similar question and then explained to us that we hadn't really tried in a way that could make changes. In order to test this supposition more completely, we tried a concerted effort to purposely make changes. We attempted to keep the first village from blowing up. We stopped the explosion and 2 people immediately died who hadn't before, one of which was your namesake, Zeke. We allowed progress to proceed. The results were that the area we were in became a derelict slum, a depressed economy, and the only businesses going were casinos, pawn shops, and sleazy hotels. The desolation and deprivation broke our spirit. We changed things back immediately and never tried again. He became thoughtful. You're in charge now, and the rules were based on the members that were. You'll have different ideas and different priorities. Read and understand the rules and the reasons behind them. Then, if you feel they should be changed, discuss it amongst yourselves, and if you want, with the original members. Don't let them browbeat you with their ideas. It's yours now. And the other members, it's yours now, and the decisions are yours. Only one thing that I and the other members insist on is that you have a guardian angel watching over your trips. Times of emergency, they may be the only thing between you and disaster. So please adhere to this one thing, injunction. You see, he saw they were all deep in thought, and the weight of what they had joined was becoming heavier. He decided to change the subject. On a lighter note, where and when do you think we are right now? Everyone shrugged, looking at the interior, only you wouldn't tell. We are now in a little place Don, Will, Frank, and I fixed up a long time ago. Our fortress of solitude, if you will. A place to get away from everything for a while. He pointed to the far left wall. Push that button and take a look outside. They went to the panel that covered the only window, pushed a button, and a large portion of the wall went up, revealing thick glass. On the other side of the glass was the surface of the moon. Their heads snapped back as they heard Scott cackling with mirth. Yep, you're on, or to be more specific, in the moon. I'm using one of Don's generators to power everything, including a nitrogen oxygenator. We used to come here and play poker once in a while, or use it for sleeping when we have pissed off our wives more than usual. More comfortable than the couch back home. It's now yours, too, to use as you want. I brought you here because I want to show you the past is not the only thing that Fred can be used for. You can travel backwards, forwards, sideways through time. You can travel from one location to another on Earth. Or you can visit planets out here. There are no limits. Here's a thought. You can go back in time, but on Mars. You can see if it really was a living planet and find out what happened to the inhabitants, if any. The only limits are in your imagination. He handed Zeke a book of instructions for the moon base and went to a wall panel. This is hooked up to Fred too, but as an auxiliary. There's another pad in the desk that connects it as well. Oh, there are spacesuits in the closet by the garage door, and in the garage is one of the lunar rovers I left up here. We fixed it up, and it's a blast riding in. Been a pleasure meeting you, and I wish you all the best. He pushed on the panel, and the back of his house was visible, and with Linus and Livy in the window. As he was about to step through, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. I almost forgot. There's some really good beer in the fridge and a cask of my wine in the counter. You'll find some fresh snacks in the cupboard. He winked and walked through, the portal closing behind him. Tom walked over to the fridge and passed out sodas, beer, and wine. Everyone looked around. It was a mini kitchen, 5 small bedrooms, a round table, shelves of history and humor books, cards, chips, and board games. 3 overstuffed couches formed a C along the back wall. Above the couches was a large painting of dogs playing poker. Donald walked over to the closet and handed out spacesuits. Zeke, peering into the garage, noticed the entrance to the garage was a double door, so you didn't suck out the air from the room. Lon stayed behind and was reading the book Scott had left, but had the suit near him. Zeke looked up before putting her helmet on. Lon, how did we get back in if everyone was going outside? Lon went through the index. Says here the horn on the rubber will open it or press the belt buckle on the suit. Oh, everyone check the back of your suit. Open the Velcro and check for an inch-thick green sponge block. That's the oxygen pack. If you don't have one, look in the closet on the top shelf. We found blocks wrapped in plastic. We all put a block in back, checked as the oxygen level rose, and then put their helmets on. Donald put his on last. Don't you want to walk on the moon? Mom lay back on the couch. You folks have fun. I'm going to flip through the manual. There may be surprises here, knowing the people who built this place. They were only out for an hour, but when they came back, Lon was asleep on the couch with the manual on his chest. Everyone went to the table, Lorna stopping to wake Lon up on the way. Well, folks, Donald started, where do we go first? Blank looks around every face. Everything was happening so quickly it hadn't really sunk in as to what they wanted to visit or when. They decided to give everyone a chance to come to grips with being formally in the guild and to put in a list of times and places they wanted to go to. Donald adjourned the meeting and everyone piled back into the lab. See everyone next week. Zeke and Donald got some horses from the barn and took a late night ride. On the way back, Donald dropped Zeke off at the village. He took care of the horses and made his way into the house. Don was still awake, looking out the window, with a cup of coffee and several of Honey's mixed berry muffins in front of him. Don made coffee for himself and sat down at the table too. Don dragged his eyes away from the window. So, how'd the first meeting go? Don sighed and tried to smile back. Very short. We need time to figure out what we want to do and see. We're meeting again on Monday. Leaning back in the chair, extending his long legs to the side of the table. Dad, I'm the leader of this group now, but I don't know what I'm leading. Don sat upright and clasped his hands together on the table. It means that you are responsible for the safety and security of the members. You are the final say in matters under consideration, but you should be doing so with a light hand. You're also responsible for Fred and making sure that the returns in Fred are always checked and rechecked. Everything depends on them working correctly during trips. The rest, well, that's up to you. Our logs and books are at your disposal. By the way, in case you haven't figured it out, being leader and looking after Fred is almost a full-time job. Kind of expected they'd appoint you leader, not just for your sterling qualities, but because you're here and on the spot. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a bank book. When I became involved with this project, Scott set me up so I would have time to work and, in a sense, play with him. Not your charge. I feel it's only right to do the same for you. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the first installment. You can expect another at the end of the year. He passed the book over. The account was in Donald's name and contained $500,000. Donald's hand trembled and he looked up with tears forming. Dad, this is a hell of a lot of money here. I mean, is this for real? Yep, and the taxes have been paid on it, so you're starting with a clean slate. Thanks, Dad. He went over and awkwardly hugged Don. You seem a little nervous about all this, son. Don sat up straighter. Not nervous, but I am a little apprehensive. Can I borrow the truck tonight? I think I'd like to go to Butte Creek and camp out, kind of clear my head. Don tossed the keys from off the cabinet. Give my best to Zeke. Don swung around with a face covered in embarrassment. Don handed another set of keys to Donald. Here are the keys to the apartment. You can either move in or use it as a rendezvous point. It's a lot more comfortable than the back of the truck. Donald hesitated, but took the keys. Thanks. How come you can make something like this seem so embarrassing? Don stretched and settled back in his chair, grabbing another muffin. I don't mean to. I like Zeke. You and her have grown up together, so it's only natural you might have developed feelings for each other. Nothing embarrassing about it. Hell, your mothers already have ideas for a shindig whenever you two decide to announce you're getting hitched. Hal's face went from red to pale in a heartbeat. You don't mean it? Don looked at his son, and a sad smile crossed his face. Son, Zeke has had you two sized up as a couple for years. Hell, every sentence she utters has us in it. If you don't feel the same about her, don't beat about the bush. Let her know and don't play with her feelings. Donald sheepishly smiled. I already think of her and I the same way. Tell Mom to start buying whatever she needs, but do so after Aunt Princess's party. Then I'll be asking her. Thanks again, Dad. He headed out the door and leapt in the truck, speeding away. On receding the airwaves, Don heard a loud Yahoo! All right, so that's, we're up to page 48. Time is once more. So that is the extent of what we're going to be reading. Oh, you go back to sleep. And next time we'll be going into, hold on, let me make sure I get these right. Yeah, I know I wrote them. I should know this stuff. No, that's not it. Time is, yeah, book 5. Time is Lost is book 5 of the Time is series. So that's the book we'll be reading next time. And the Guild of Travelers, this is going to have a lot of the trips from both groups. Both guilds are going to be going on soon. So it's going to get interesting. New beginning is the start. So, all right, I hope you will be here. I'm going to put this out either today or tomorrow because, like I said, it takes a while for me to get these done. I appreciate the people who have been watching and coming back to see more of my videos. Do me a favor, spread the word. If you like them, let other people know and get some more people on here. I'm not getting a whole lot, but you know, if I get one, I will continue to do this. Not only just in my books, but I will read anybody's books that wants me to. I think at a later date, I will start going over some of my other books. I've got a book of shorts that we'll do some more readings from. I've got a book of 2 books of very, very short novels, like novelettes or whatever you call them, novellas. So we may go through the entire book on those 2. I've got a book of mysteries, and I have a book about a time-traveling painter, which I think is kind of unique. I have never heard of any time-traveling painters in any books before. So that's our reading for today from Maddie. Maddie and me, that's say goodbye and hope to see you again real soon. So thanks for visiting. Take care of yourselves, and I really appreciate you being here. You have a good day. Bye. Maddie, I gotta go turn off the computer. You gonna stay here? Okay.